Namaste. Welcome to the Festival of Bharat. I am your host Kamal Madishetty. Bharat is one of the only civilization, if not the only civilization, where women have played such an important role in shaping the history and the course of our civilization. Yet, so little is known about them. One major attempt to bring to light of such stories of women who have shaped our civilization is Aryaa, an anthology of Vedic women. And today we are joined by its curator, GV Shivakumar G. Namaste, GV Shivakumar Ji. Welcome to the Festival of
Kamal.
Bharat.
Namaste, Kamal. Thank you for having me on your platform. Look forward.
Thank you, sir. Shivakumar Ji, he is an IT professional in the domain of learning and development with a very deep interest in Bharatiya Sanskriti and history. He is a scholar in residence at Indica and also a consulting editor at Indica today, and is an exemplary scholar of Indian history, culture, civilization. He is also one of the co-authors of the book Unsung Valor, and now is the curator of this very new and interesting book, which is called Arya, an anthology of Vedic women. So you are a scholar who is engaged with so many different aspects of our philosophical and intellectual traditions in Indian civilization, and also its applications, more importantly, in today's times. How have you embarked upon this journey? Because you have written about subjects from ranging from Mahabharata and Ramayana to environment and ecology. So could you take us through your journey in this scholarship?
Thank you. Yes, Kamal. Like everybody else in this domain, all my initial years have been a very a strong engagement with the tradition in Shraddha. That is, there is something that you found and experienced every time you engaged with it, and then the engagement continued. That's how all my initial years have been. But at some stage, you see that the world is significantly different. The world thinks differently, and our own thought processes are different. And slowly you realize that the world is not just different. Right in India, there is a conflict between multiple thought systems and thought processes. So all of that, I've seen multiple, you know, versions or not versions, multiple forms of those conflicts, and all of that has not, of course, taken made any dent in my own Shraddha, and that engagement with the tradition in different ways has continued. But I've always constantly watched what is the nature of this conflict, what are the conflicts that we have on the ground, and why are these conflicts existing, and what is the nature of these conflicts, and how must we resolve the distortion, or rather the way the tradition views its own heritage and history and the past, rather not history but the past, and in particular the way we think of women of having contributed to this civilization and past and the present, and the way the modern world thinks of it, there is a significant difference. So this I've noted long back. There are other conflicts that that I've noted. uh, Most of the left liberal secular narratives have problematized so many aspects of the tradition, and it was always there at the back of my mind that this ought to be corrected, and it's not easy to correct. So that the thought that there are corrections to be done itself is like 25 years old thought, I must say. I still remember a moment of really awakening was when I read. Uh, Usually, there are many plays I have read first and then watched later. But one of the first plays which I watched first and read later was Girish Karnad's Fire and Rain, which in Kannada is Agni Mattu Male. So it's based on a play, a small episode in the Vanaparva. It's Upakhyana in the Vanaparva called Yavakrita Upakhyana. So Yavakrita is a small, a son of a sage, and many things happen. And I don't want to get into the detail of the story. And there are 5, 6 characters in that. Interestingly, so in Girish Karnad's play, Fire and Rain, takes a certain form where, Karnad is able to present a modern view. He's able to insert it, and you won't realize it if you just watch the play. So I watched the play and then I read the play. It was very effective play, but because it is from Mahabharata, I chose to go back and then read the Yavakritopakhyaನ, and I was shocked. The perspective of the tradition is significantly different from that of the play. And that set me into thinking that there is something amiss over here. It can't be like this. So, one thing led to the other, and then the engagement with Mahabharata always continued. So, I've always been reading multiple versions of Mahabharata in different texts and so on and so forth. At a much later stage, I read uh, 2, 3 important things. One was Dr. Balagangadhara's Hidden in His Blindness. And, no book clarifies the history of last 300 years from an Indian point of view than that book. Its impact on me was enormous. I mean, I've read it, 15, 17 years back, and the uh, energy generated by the book is still fresh in my mind. Then I also read Dharampal, and that clarified how the 19th century was a significant reshaper in our civilization, so which has made it difficult to access the past. So while Balagangadhara explains why the West saw the India the way they did, and they saw it in their own forms, and we don't need to buy into that. So he helped a reverse gaze. Actually, he helped create a reverse gaze. The Rampal clarified that how, in what form the distortion actually happened physically on the ground. But the most important influence on me was Dr. K.S. Narayanacharya's works. He has written a series of 10 books called Veda Samskriti Parichaya in Kannada. I mean, I hope somebody will translate that to English. But if somebody has read Aurobindo, then one will get enough of it, actually. So that clarified a lot of, native worldview clarity is something that I got from it. So when you read it, you appreciate all the Vaidika tattvas, and in the right way, and he has organized it in a way that it helps and aids the modern world. Otherwise, it's not easy. You will not get it in this form. The form is not a sukta by sukta translation. It is a conceptual reorganization from a narrative standpoint for the modern world. It's fantastic. So that helped me develop the native lens. So, the process of throwing light for the last 300 years and clearly demonstrating what is the gap that was created by the British era, and, a proper native lens. After that, I began to, reread everything from this light, and many things became clear. So it takes many readings to develop certain perspective. So after that, I was very, very determined about 3, 4 things. One is that I understood why and how, apart from the political vileness, etc., why the West, or why the modern world views India's position, with respect to women differently from the way we think of it. So I understood that it's not just vileness; it is much more than that. It's the inability to appreciate certain things. So I was determined to correct that, and that's how Arya was there in my mind, and I will come to how we actually ended up finally beginning that process. That is a separate thing altogether. But at the same time, all this is part of the uh, larger correction that we need to effect, which is in terms of using our perspectives, transform them into models and frameworks that can be applied to the model world. That's a civilizational correction. It's no one person's job. It's a job of an entire community, and you know, contributing my own droplets into that ocean. So that is the bigger thing. But keeping Mahabharata as the civilizational vehicle, because it is such a civilizational text that it it can create those indices and hooks through which once you step onto that, you can really soar into a totally different universe. So this is how I have kind of crafted my personal journey in this space. The first step is Arya in globalization.
That is an amazing journey, Shivakumarji. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think many viewers, I'm sure, would also, want to understand how one, starts out on this journey. Because we first encounter the misrepresentations of our civilization, our history, our culture, but many of us don't necessarily have an answer to it or know how we can respond to it. But I think, like you mentioned, going back and developing an authentically Bharatiya lens, a worldview of our own is very important. And I think, as you have mentioned, after that, then you start looking at things from our own Bharatiya perspective, which is so important. Shiv Kumar ji, you mentioned how what sort of inspired you to look at women in ancient India in particular. But was there any particular prompt, or rather, why do you think this is something in particular that people should know about, both in India and also outside India?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, among the things that have very strongly felt, it is this, there is a reason for it. One of the first stories that I read as a boy, as a kid, was Sati Savitri. In that story, she is brave, she is courageous, she takes her own decisions, she is divine. All men come and say, no, we are not your match at all, you are somebody totally different. Finally, she goes in search of her own husband, and then she overrules Narada, she overrules her father Ashwapati, marries somebody who's going to die next year, and then, you know, goes and tricks and snatches her husband, from Yama himself. So, my own personal image was that of a fantastic lady, a powerful lady, a Shakti. But in the modern world, Sati Savitri is an image for docile, submissive, helpless. That was, I simply could not digest that. And this happened very early in the 90s, as I stepped into, especially this imagery is strong in the Hindi movies. And, in my graduation, I noted this strongly that, nobody in my environment would have ever said that Savitri is a docile woman, but yet the entire modern English world was pressing this narrative all the time. And it's not just one thing, there are umpteen number of things. So there is a perception that women were not educated, and so on and so forth. And so this instills a needless inferiority complex in both men and women in different ways. Men will develop a false guilt, and women will develop a false anger with towards tradition, if that is the only narrative that they have access to. So each time I present a story from the past, people become sorted immediately, because it's right there, out there. So and I saw that this multiple times, the distortion associated with Sita's character, and Draupadi's character. Now Sai Swarupa's novel really demonstrated that it's Draupadi who comes and changes the whole Sabha's scenario. Okay, and a Dhritarashtra who was rejoicing the victory, develops cold feet and becomes afraid, and then returns back after looking at fierce Draupadi, and like that. Even if this is the from the Itihasa Purana. Even if you come into the Kavya era, it is like that. Everybody talks about, Shakuntala of Kalidasa. The same Kalidasa has written other Kavyas where, women are performing various roles and so on and so forth. Anybody looking into the art of Chandraketu in West Bengal will be flabbergasted at the kind of imagery, especially with respect to what women were doing in those times. They were warriors. They had their own music troops, and their body language is one of being their own selves and independent. And yet the narrative is that women were not free, and so on and so forth. This took you can tell stories to people, give instances, anecdotes. All that doesn't help beyond a certain point. What is necessary is to take the initiative from a narrative standpoint, and that has to happen both on the creative and the non-fiction front. So you need scholarly academic works on this, and you also need creative reimagination. So it was there in my mind, and I used to discuss this with Harikiran Vadlamani Garu, who is the head of Indica, many times, that some narratives have to change. And he also had this in mind because he had seen something called Women of Substance in the 80s, and used to wonder that why Indian women are not there in that. And it was there in my mind that starting from Vedic era right till 1800, we must recreate all the all women who have contributed to the civilization. Itihasa Kavya will be treated seriously and not like a mythology that's not true. It's not like it. These characters exist because in some ways they lived, and they have been imagined as such because of many other inspirations, and because the civilization shaped women to be like that. Women were like that. So the vision is to be able to bring these narratives right till 1800. So we should have 100 Aryaa books, each covering 10 prominent women in a particular time period. You will get it. In Chalukya era, Rashtrakuta era, there are administrators, poets who were women. Ashtadhyayi has a word for women, a woman teacher and a woman student. And a common noun in a civilization takes shape only after a certain number of people are there. An exception does not lead to a common noun. In 11th century in Karnataka, there is a stone inscription where there is an image of a lady is carved. Her name is given as Savinirmadi, and Savinirmadi is described as Sarvashastra Prasiddhe. And there is a stool next. She is holding a manuscript on her left hand, and there is a stool on her right which has a pile of manuscripts. What does this say? This says that the society is honoring and taking pride in her achievement, which also cannot happen if the society wants to subdue. And especially in Karnataka, where I'm born, brought up, I've seen this continuously over a long time. So until I really stepped into the intellectual world, it did not even occur to me that such distortion exists, because around me life was completely different. So finally, Harikiran Garu was also making this concept of anthologies, because that's one good way of creating a narrative. So the first anthology had come up, and we all had contributed. So then he called for curators for anthology, and this was there in my mind, and immediately I wrote it. And because it was there in his mind, he immediately accepted. And then voila, we started the journey 2.5 years back, and in no time we got, in 6 months we got 40 plus entries. After that, it took a long time because of COVID and other reasons. So finally here it is, in front of everybody. So this, of course, 10 stories, and of course my own favorite Savitri is not there still, and we'll get there. But the point is to be able to, you know redraw this narrative very clearly. And more than anything is, when anything, we have to leave this legacy for our own children to be able to access this and not suffer false inferiority complex.
Absolutely, Shivakumar ji, and so much of it, like so much of what you said is, I mean, brings back so many experiences and encounters from. I think I'm sure everybody's personal lives, and because we hear these conversations at our workplaces, in our during when we were educated, and how this false sense of inferiority is almost drilled down into our brains, because. I mean, it's like the best example. I think the one you mentioned, Sati Savitri, is almost like a pejorative. It's used in a certain way, but the actual history and the reality is so starkingly and so contrastingly different. I think that's all the more reason why I think we should pay attention to the reality.
As late as the 20th century, the one of the greatest achievements of Mysore was in the period of Krishnajendra Wadiyar, K.R. Wadiyar the fourth, and it was his mother who shaped him like that. And father had died earlier. He was a young boy, and she took control, and she took so many decisions. And this example is right there in front of us, and that's why in this region, that perception of women being subdued a lot is not there. But yet, in spite of all this being so, if narrative can be so much manipulated in the span of decades, it's quite enormous. And that also gives me hope that, you know, if it has only happened in the span of few decades, we should be able to reverse it also easily.
Absolutely. Thanks to scholarship and books like yours for doing that. And like you rightly said, I think any part of Bharat, if we dig a little deeper, we go back and read, I'm sure we will find so many women who have shaped our history. And I was just thinking about my own region of Telangana, and instantly, Rudramma Devi was one name which came to my mind. And I think, yeah, I think everybody can similarly think of so many such people from and women from our history. So if you could also share a little bit more about your book, in the sense that who are the women who have been talked about in the book. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah. So we have 10 stories. The first story is that of Chitrangada, written by Rohini Gupta. The second story is Damayanti, written by Manjula Tekal. Third story is Shakuntala, written by Prasad Kulkarni. Fourth is Subhadra, written by Bharati. Fifth is Madhavi, written by Madhurima. Sixth is Satyavati, written by Deepak. 7th is Ulupi, written by Rajni. 8th is Gargi, written by Celia. 9th is Maitreyi, written by Kavitankar. 10th is it's a new story. I mean, it's not a new story, but it's a less known character called Shandilya Durita, written by Ranjit, and that's a poem. So the critical thing is that in each of this there are certain important framework elements, guiding principles that has shaped these stories. One, it is, although all the stories are told in the modern idiom and with a creative reimagination, the markers of these stories are all from the tradition. So based on the markers provided by the tradition on a terrain, rest of it is filled through creative imagination. So nowhere have we crossed the line, or a factual, or a claim in the tradition is not violated. That is number one. Number two, the choice of these stories, of course, from 47 I selected, but in many ways, apart from the quality and so on and so forth, there are the other choice is also that it covers a spread. So there is a dharmartha kama moksha spread in the stories. It's almost comes through in the order of the stories also. And third thing is that we have chosen stories from accounts where the protagonist is having a certain civilizational contribution, unique contribution in the respective context. For instance, Shakuntala is not taken from Kalidasa; it is taken from Mahabharata. This series was Veda Itihasa Purana series. In the Mahabharata, she is not as gentle as in Kalidasa's version. So many do not know about that. So that is, she goes and challenges, Dushyanta in the court. And, Sarvadamana is already born. The boy, her son is already born when she goes to the court. Whereas that's not how it is in the Kalidasa's story. And it's important to know that her son was born. Dushyanta did not know. In the ashrama, he was growing up for a long time. And as a single mother is a modern term, but that's how she was bringing him up with help of others in the ashrama. Nobody raised an eyebrow in that. Similarly, there is a story of Madhavi, who is Yayati's daughter, and that's one of the most distorted stories. Starting from Bhishma Sahani, everybody has distorted it. So it's one thing to criticize tradition, but it's another to transform it into a form that makes criticism easy. That's intellectual dishonesty. That's how all criticism is 95%, intellectually and culturally dishonest, criticism, and which many stalwarts have themselves performed. Sometimes under pressure, sometimes because of one's own self-interest, and so on and so forth. So it's in Madhavi's story, we have set right the traditional view, and one has to read it to enjoy that. In Subhadra's story, Subhadra is almost, see, in Mahabharata what happens is that different characters come at different points in time and go, because they are serving a different purpose. Whereas when we extract a particular character out from various points, you get it, then you realize the complete narrative. Subhadra plays a very key role. She is one of the few who stays back when every Pandavas go to the heavens. So she plays a very crucial role in that dark era when Parikshit has to be brought up. It's only Parikshit, Uttara, Subhadra, and Yuyutsu are the only people who are there at that point in time. The entire past is gone. It's enormous past is completely gone, not accessible by Parikshit. It's, do we even imagine the enormity of that situation? So this story imagines that enormity and then places Subhadra in that context. So like that, every story, Ulupi, she stays at the, she's always at the border, but she does many interesting things and it alters the course of things. She almost, sees the future and prepares for it quietly. And in the story of Damayanti, she is the hero of the story. She's the one who saves Nala finally. And Chitrangada is carving her own niche because she wants to ensure that her father's kingdom has a future. So like that, Satyavati, we all know what is the kind of treacherous times that she navigates as a person. Gargi and Maitri, we all know very well. But what is the nature of their personality? In most of the conversations, it is their narratives, it is their the philosophical dimension that gets overemphasized. We have mirrored that with you know uh, with their own personalities, juxtaposing their personalities and the philosophical journey, so it becomes a human story, but you know without ignoring the philosophy, rather complementing the philosophical journey. So that's the two stories written by Celia Pillai and Kavita Megama. So like this, and the last story, Shandila Duita, very few people know. It comes in 3-4 pages and goes off. In Mahabharata, that's one thing. Many characters who come in 3-4 pages and go off, are phenomenal. And Shandila Duita does something extraordinary that, you will not find in many other instances. So the objective is to, show how many, each of these are persons in their own right. They have an individuality. So in the tradition, within the framework of dharma, life is not so constrained that your individuality does not develop. Rather, your individuality develops in the right direction. And that is how India is the only civilization where you see women scholars and women in the top positions all through until 1800. Only after that you will find it in the other civilizations. Yeah, of course, in Egyptian civilization you will have some exceptions, but in Indian civilization it is much much more than an exception. You will see it among the commoners, among the royalty, among the elite, and you will see it in all walks of life. So so the so it's not, the tradition is not in conflict with individuality. The tradition only alerts you on the dangers of individualism, which crosses a certain line and becomes, creates a conflict with the rest of your ecosystem. To have a great persona and individuality, sense of achievement, you don't have to be in conflict with your environment. So the principle of Shakti is that of nurturing and protection. So that is how the feminine tattva of Bharatiya Parampara is, and that was fulfilling for a very long time until the society was destroyed, where other narratives started growing very easily. So it is very necessary to tell this story to people, and it is very essential to establish this complex in absolute competition. Otherwise, when a single book is not going to serve the purpose beyond a certain point. It's just a step, but we hope that this will create new cultural conversations, and it will force people to relook at old narratives.
Absolutely. So, thanks for sharing that. I think, like you mentioned, it's so important that, especially people in India, get this perspective and get the right understanding of their own history and women in their own history, because the cultural distortions and the cultural sort of, I mean, to put it plainly, attacks on our history are many. And the otherwise, because the gender perspective that is presented in front of us as the only way out is almost like a perpetual conflict between men and women, which is actually not the case and not the right perspective our own point of view. And like you mentioned, women in India and in Indian's history have shaped our societies and our civilization's trajectory in a positive way and in a very influential and impactful way. And I think your book and all these stories do a great job in actually bringing light or putting light on those aspects. And to especially, I think, our viewers and I think parents who might want to gift their daughters a book, I think there cannot be a better book, I would say, than this, or even anybody else for that
You know,
matter.
you know, I knew that, this is obviously written in a language that is that appeals to 20 age group of 20 plus. But now I was, although we, our own aspiration was to be able to, for the book to be relevant in the age group of 13 to 20. I was keeping my fingers crossed, but now, quite a few parents have said that, many of my friends have said that their daughters began to read it first and they're enjoying it. So that's a big relief for me. And, that is, I want this book.
I'm sure they are, and also more generally, I mean, I think this is a great book to give to anybody around you. In fact, men and women both, but particularly women. I mean, I think Raksha Bandhan is a is a few months away, but I think you can already make plans to for your gift right away. Shivkumarji, you also mentioned about the need for understanding and grounding our understanding in Bharatiya worldview. And one of the things in which you have proposed to do that, or one of the frameworks that you have proposed to do this, is the Purushartha framework. And Purusharthas, of course, is something that we understand, at a broad level, but to apply it in contemporary times and to apply it in various different fields is something that is very interesting. And for the benefit of our viewers, could you please share what is the framework basically, and also how we can apply it in different contexts?
Yeah, this is a close subject to my heart. So I think, it is common knowledge, and it is good. It is common knowledge that Chaturvidha Purushartha is Dharmartha Kama Moksha. But I think what is not sufficiently appreciated is that why this is Purushartha, and why is it so important, and what role does it play? I mean, what difference does it make? What difference has it made at all? That is the critical thing. So in the Bharatiya Parampara, like a Buddhist doctrines, if I have to explain, that's not the right, way of explaining, but the modern world appreciates that narrative, axiomatic narrative form. So we say that every man has the right to fulfill one's needs, that is artha. Every man has the right to fulfill one's desires, that is kama. But artha and kama must not cross the line of dharma, is the fourth point. And the third point. The fourth point is the most important point. That's the differentiating point. That if there is no pursuit of the sacred, the moksha, then beyond a certain point, it's very difficult to sustain dharma. So, in order to be a dharmic, in order for one to pursue dharma, it is essential to be on a sacred path. This is a differentiating concept. And there are various Puranic stories. If you read the Dashavatara stories and all that, you will get it. So there is an interrelationship. So this is the first principle. The second thing is that since everybody has a right to fulfill one's needs and desires, by default that will clash. So the desires and the needs of one individual clashes with the another. Of communities, one will clash with the other. Of states, one will clash with the other. Of countries, one will clash with the other. And this is where the dharma becomes very complex. So the next level of complexity is that the line that distinguishes need and the desire is also not easy to draw at all times. The priority is always the need, and a desire ought to be sacrificed, but a need should not be sacrificed. At the same time, the reverse is also true. If the needs and desires are not sufficiently not satisfied, your pursuit of the sacred also will collapse. So dharma fails there too. It's a dual relationship. So dharma is that which helps one pursue artha and kama in a sustainable manner. 1. 2. It opens the path of the sacred journey for every individual. So it has a dual, function. Now, if we keep this as a basic framework, then there is a lot that you can achieve. You can reshape. Let me put it this way: the whole Indian life was organized based on the appreciation of these principles. What is that appreciation? That appreciation is that a dharmic pursuit of artha and kama is impossible if an individual is individual only. That it's meaningful, it's a sustainable pursuit requires a community organization. This is the next principle. That is why we built a sustainable civilization for 5,000 years. We should emphatically always say that. We may have suffered a huge dent in the 19th century. Even then we have not suffered. Our communities are still alive. And our communities are Purushartha communities. Now this is why we should never ever be, apologetic about the Kula Jati Varna organization. That is what has ensured a sustainable civilization. Way forward can be different. That's a different thing. But the past, we should not suffer inferiority on that end. That we need not problematize it, because until 1800 you will hardly find problematic scenarios. It's only after 1800 you will find problematic scenarios. But that's a separate debate. But the point is, community is an essential instrument for the pursuit of the Purushartha. Now our communities are lost. So we'll have whatever function that a community was performing, something else has to perform. And that is where the recreation ought to be. And so there is a scope to apply, if Purushartha as a framework was applied and communities were built. What does that mean? It means that a community sustained a set of instruments to pursue sacred journey. And It organized all its performances, consumption, aesthetic, rituals, and sacred instruments very uniquely to the community. That's why every community has a different consumption pattern. Every community's activities, performances are very different. Performances are, tempered with an aesthetic so that the sacred is not disturbed, and so on and so forth. Every community has five elements. They have, their performances. Performances means what they do to create something, to enjoy everything. All are performances. Their creative acts are also performances. The performances of a weaver community is very different from the performance of a fisher community, and they elevate all their performances with some aesthetics. They weave is sacred around that. They build rituals so that the sacred uh, paths are not disturbed, and with good aesthetics and so on and so forth. So the fivefold performance, consumption, ritual, aesthetic, and sacred is well organized for each community. It's exclusive to each community. That's why the competition was not that high. If everybody had to access the same thing, competition would be high. Competition was less because every community had access to its own exclusive set of instruments. Diversity is a consequence of that. So diversity is a consequence of purushartha, because individual cannot pursue the purushartha, because you need a community, and because a community can be configured through the fivefold experiences of performance, consumption, aesthetic, sacred, and ritual towards purushartha in a unique way. Nobody had to, and everybody had that autonomy. Largely, it was minimum conflict, I would say. Conflicts existed, but it's not like a mass society where, in a mass society, there is always excessive competition, due to which violence is also high. Now, if a community was configured for Purushartha and the communities are now disintegrating, something else will need to perform. Plus, so who is that? So that is where my research is. So my own proposition is that the converse is also true. If you are part of a certain aggregation and that is not configured for Purushartha, then you can do whatever at home. You are gradually eroding yourselves. So you cannot say that on the road I'll be, or I'll go 9 to 6, do something in an environment where Purushartha is not recognized, and I'll come back and perform my, ancient family traditions, and that would be sufficient. My proposition is that is not possible. So you need a significant reconfiguration of the modern institutional elements towards Purushartha in order for us to reclaim our civilization. And this is one dimension. I'm not saying that this is the only thing, but Purushartha's important success will come when institutions are reconfigured for Purushartha. And what does that mean? That's my research. So my latest paper on this is called, Purushartha based institution design framework. So for a dharmic srishti, finally you have to create. It's in creation that you will, make a difference to the civilization. When you create dharmic products, dharmic output, then the civilization changes. So srishti has to be based on our principles. Abdicating srishti, you can't, set right anything. Setting right means creating. So this is my summary of my hypothesis on the Purushartha. And the good thing about the Purushartha is that, like this, we can develop multiple frameworks. We can figure out, we can think, how will it help an individual, develop a decision-making framework based on Purushartha. It's possible. Because Life is all about needs and desires and sustainability and sacred experiences. That's it basically. It's a very psychologically, and from a realistically speaking, it's the most natural kind of a framework. Many things about Bharatiya Parampara is about anchoring it in the natural tattva, the tattva that exists. You're not creating it, you're recognizing it. So, it's our journey should be towards Purushartha.
Very, very fascinating, Shivakumar ji. I look forward to reading your papers on this, and viewers should also check them out. You have also applied this framework to some particular specific disciplines like international relations, for example, just like you mentioned, from an individual, how I think that's one point which often gets missed. Like you mentioned, how it's important that individual as well as community both are in sync with the Purushartha framework, but also the international relations and how states can also view their actions and how they act at the global stage from a Purushartha framework. Can you also quickly tell us a little bit about that as well?
Thanks, Kamal. Well, developing but I have um, some rough contour of this of the same. Once again, as I said, it's about needs and desires and our sacred, you know, spaces. Just as individuals, now the overall civilization, just as a community, the overall civilization also, in many ways we will have needs and desires, and there is a collective sacred space that we have evolved and we recognize it. And of course, whether other countries state it or not, they have their needs, they have their desires. Some have their sacred spaces, some do not have. Purely secular countries will refuse to say they have any sacred space, but they do have their sacred spaces, what they think as sacred spaces. Now we should be able to you know uh, develop a framework where we invest in our relationships with other countries where our needs are critically met. That must be our priority. Similarly, we should be able to recognize which are all the desires, which desires of ours will are to be met, and what are the consequences of that. A prioritization of our desires, and accordingly we invest in international relation uh, with other countries which fulfill those needs. We should be able to say that we also will need to contribute to others' needs and desires to be able to achieve it. So there we should be able to say that, okay, if I contribute to this need of the other country, my need will get hurt or not, my desire will get hurt or not. Based on that, make the prioritization. Similarly, if others' desires, you may serve somebody else's desire to fulfill your need. So you will pick and choose where a bigger need is fulfilled, or a bigger desire, a desire that will take you to a very strong pole position in the future. Your some future needs will be secured. So it's a complex ordering of needs and desires of yours and the other nations that will help you in you know making a good prioritization. Then the dharma steps in where sustainability is. you know a desire that I have, which may be fulfilled today by another country, but is that sustainable? So you will you will start thinking about sustainability of needs and desires of yours and the others. Similarly, if I am, fulfilling the need of a country in order to, achieve certain need or desire of mine, will it hurt a friend nation's need or desire? In which case, what should I do? Where should I prioritize? So if we draw then, I can imagine this as a complex graph, and certain graph traversal techniques also can be used, so that, you're traversing through, you're building a click. There's a theory called click in graph theory, okay, which is that click that I must focus on, which needs and desires will have the least impact on sustainability, will do very less damage on any of my sacred spaces, and similarly to that of my friend nations, and so on and so forth. So the whole world can be organized as a graph of needs and desires, and where a node establishes a thick relationship or a thin relationship between friend nations, and we can then do a very good graph theory based plans can be drawn. So this is something I have in mind. I've just roughly put up a very rough note on that. So it will take a significant amount of time to evolve. But I don't see why Purushartha will not be relevant in this. So that much I am now convinced, that as if the moment it is relevant as a decision making framework, its potential to apply in every field is very high. It may be difficult to apply in some fields, because this organization into needs and desires and sustainability may become too difficult in some places. But in certain other spaces, it may become very easy. And there too, you don't have to be perfect. As long as there are a set of people perceiving it, perceiving needs and desires differently, a collective of that can help draw good conclusions. And finally, everything is anyway intuitive and heuristic. But this at least gives certain method to the madness, and it does not leave it to mere narratives. Because right now there is a lot of narratives and a collection of narratives that is shaping things, and ideologies behind those narratives. Some of those ideologies are not even ours actually. But Purushartha is a very realistic framework, and gives a very, I won't say mathematical, but a very structured way of approaching it, and begins to helps us think about what is a need and what is a desire, and what is sustainability, and appreciate the fact that if you don't protect your sacred spaces, everything will begin to hurt, and how to give priority. It's a prioritization framework of a certain kind. And I think relations are structured enough where we should be able to apply it, because its dynamic is not as high as a finance sector's dynamic, where things go haywire too much, and that kind of a model driven approach is going to be very difficult. Whereas in international relations, most things are somewhat stable. Things don't change every single day, and we should be able to develop this kind of a framework.
Absolutely. And I think, like you mentioned, international relations, the impact of decisions is also very diffused and not necessarily numeric in the way it happens in the financial world. Actually, listening to the framework, I think one of the things that I think I would certainly do is take a piece of paper and a pen and actually put down, the different priorities that we have. Let's say for a country like India, we are energy dependent. So something like energy imports would sort of be our needs, and something else like maybe a leadership position in a particular multilateral fora would be a desire, and how they might come in conflict.
Or getting back to you would be a desire.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, and I think it's very fascinating, and I think students of international relations would actually benefit a lot if you actually sit down and do an exercise of sorts to understand this, and apply it in the Indian context, or for any other country for that matter. And speaking of international relations, Shiv Kumarji, we all know that India has the presidency of the G20 this year, and which is basically a forum for discussing the trajectory of global economy, but also having wider conversations about how people look at themselves, the environment around them, and also the prevailing political and economic order in their own countries and also globally. Uh, what do you think should be the guiding principles for India as it engages with the world on platforms like G20 and also other such platforms?
See, I'm not an expert on international relations, but I have a civilizational point to make. See, I think we will have to slowly develop that confidence that and assert that we have a philosophy of life that is significantly different, and that philosophy has translated itself into traditions and social frameworks and daily life, very significantly different. And it's not that we are seeking a fortress where these things can live comfortably. We have to emphasize this, and experiences around this need to be accessible to everybody, not just Indians. That is how I would say we must leverage an international forum, like G20. Let's say this happiness index that is coming. We should be very confident that a highly community oriented, ritualistic, sacred pursuing society will definitely be more happy than other communities. We can't be responding to these things in a fora like G20. We should be able to confidently talk about these things as though it is natural. We have to use this in every step of our engagement with the rest of the world. We've done that already to some extent. So, we have confidently projected yoga as universally relevant for everybody. I think the first step has been taken. In the past, although very famous personalities have been practicing as individuals, and with some individuals also took it out, but the state never participated in that. But now, with yoga as a civilizational strength, I think the state has participated. Now that is how it has to be. Now every single international forum, we have to put forward something from our civilizational thought, transform that is as a Vajrayudha, and use that. So for instance, Purushartha. I think it's a fantastic thing to it's about the individual, it's about the community, it's about nation. It has multiple dimensions. Similarly, are the achievements of women in India. And nobody will be able to find a Swami Nirmadi, right? So, and the acceptance of women in political positions in India, all that has been much easy, higher than the rest of the world. We didn't even have to push policy before that itself. Whatever criticism we may have, we have a long way to go. That's fine, but we still, even during the freedom movement, we've had a significant number of women contributing. So these are narratives that we must keep on pushing into these forums in a natural way. But for that, we need to figure out, what it has to be structured against the agenda of that particular conference. So I do not know exactly what is the agenda for this particular G20 summit, but we'll have to fit it into that. There has to be travels associated with that, and so on. So this requires, so every international forum, one or two unique Indian thoughts with transformed into useful instruments for that context has to go. Now that requires a think tank to work and say that, okay, these are 350 summits that we participate in a year. For each, these are the 10 concepts that are extremely useful, and in this we pick these two, we transform that into a specific engagement tool, and then we use it, and then in that use, rest of the world must experience Indian civilization. So I would say creating experiences of Indian civilization that helps everybody in their current context. It's not that, the purpose should not be to appreciate Indian civilization. The purpose should be to create some value where it is a value for both parties who are together applying that and creating. Today, if you today everybody loves Ramanujan, because the mathematics that he established is there for the whole world to access. I am sure, Ashtanga Yoga concepts, etc. I mean, their Yama Niyama, the whole rituals standing on significant, philosophical foundation that yoga provides. But yoga is now only popular as asanas. There is an opportunity for us to transform the entire Ashtanga Yoga framework into a lot of rituals for daily life. Now, those things have to happen. We are right now still in a lot of history correction mode. That's important, but framework creation is far more important.
Absolutely, Shivakumar ji, and I think right now, as things stand, sometimes these ideas are almost they're seen as something that you just project in a vacuum. But like you mentioned, it is actually important for us in India when we go out there to realize that these have value for people across the world. Just like
Yeah.
I think, for example, in some other field, for example, if we talk about India's technological innovations, it's not just the fact that India has opened so and so bank accounts, but also these are frameworks and technologies which others can benefit from. I think similarly, when we talk about our civilizational heritage, it's not just talking about it for the sake of it, but also trying to distill those principles and actually share it with everybody, which is what exactly I think we should be doing when we are sort of talking about India's leadership at the global stage.
Yeah, it's for today and tomorrow. That has to be a conversation. Otherwise, it's apology free.
Absolutely, and I think one thing definitely, as you mentioned, is confidence about our own identity and our heritage. But I think probably the other thing that you also mentioned, and probably more critical at this juncture of our history, is also self-awareness. We'll be able to project something only when we are aware about it, and I think that sort of is yet another reminder that even for something like, let's say, foreign policy or some other aspect of let's say public policy, or even the way we project ourselves, we have to go back and do our own homework in terms of what is it that we want to project, rather than just spending all our efforts in projecting. So I think that's again for me. I think it sounds like a reminder that we have to invest more in understanding our own knowledge systems better.
Each of us must own one text.
Right.
That's
Absolutely. Just to ask you a little more about this, Shivkumar ji. India has been materially growing. We very soon become a very big economy, and as we grow materially, our capabilities will increase, and our sort of influence at the world stage will increase. In the current context that we see, the kind of challenges that we see in the world, what do you think can be some of the contributions that India can make at the global stage in the years to come, or even I would say maybe in the decades to come?
I think language computation, Ashtadhyayi, is some. I mean, that achievement has not been surpassed yet. Unfortunately, we are not able to leverage it because sufficient number of us we are not studying Ashtadhyayi. That's one of the biggest regrets in my mind is that you know one of the greatest achievements of our civilization, that has to be told to us by Noam Chomsky. I think that is something that we can definitely take forward. Yeah, I agree that there are things that have gone may have gone away from us. Mathematics, for instance, a lot has happened, but yet I feel that when Professor Manjul Bhargava spoke about those things, I think uh, you know he has drawn inspiration from the past, so it is possible to draw inspiration from our mathematics, and we have to study that. And we have not studied, we only know that there is Aryabhatta and Varahamihira and all that, but I don't think any of us have done any proper study on that. But one of the biggest areas where we can take forward is the design, experience design. See, India shaped experiences, the aesthetic, the ritualistic experiences that ensured that our consumption was less. And that's not a joke that what we have achieved. Modern world is heavy in consumption. Sustainability is a crisis. That's one area where I think we have done just simply outstandingly. That is one thing. Two, we underestimate the what the contribution of rituals in creating beauty in daily life. And we are so over focused on industrial contribution that we do not focus on experiences that are required for daily life. you know when we think of contribution, we always have an industrial output in mind. That is obviously important. The design will come into that. If we could design such marvelous architectures, the principles of design can be extracted from them for the modern world too, and we have to figure that out, how we need to do that. We can do that. There are people have done it also. The if you look at the house designs of India, I mean, there is a certain beauty to it, and how to achieve that in the modern world. Unfortunately, architects have completely abandoned the civilization. And that should have been the easiest starting point, because that is still alive to see. Whereas, our other abstract intellectual forms are much less accessible. So I'm always surprised how could the architects have totally abandoned something that is so crystal clear visible. So these are some of the areas where, like I said, I mean, I'm discounting Purushartha. The yoga is not the asanas. The Ashtanga yoga has significant daily life transformation. I think, see, one of the biggest achievements of Bharatiya Parampara is to create that hand over that autonomy to communities and individuals and families so that they can create beauty in their daily lives. And that did not happen incidentally or accidentally. It happened because ritual design is an art and craft and science in India. So that we have the opportunity space to restore access to beauty for families. I don't think the modernity it only has to create more television serials. It has to create more. It is a consumption heavy experience design, whereas Bharatiya Parampara can create easy consumption experience design. We should not abandon that. Of course, I understand still that we have to our output must be different. Physical output must be different. Only then people will take a look at the civilization's potential very seriously. There, I think design principles need to be brought in, because there is a certain touch and feel to Indian muslin, for instance. We have created. How did they create it? I mean, why? Yeah, of course, modern technology will make it impossible to create such things. But what was that? We've kind of lost it actually. So we'll have to study some of the material that we used to create and figure out how to recreate it. But the experience design principle, I think, is a significant opportunity space for us to bring to modern physical output also. And now that we have a lot of digital output, so I think we will be able to create. See, in visual communication, there is a lot that Indian principles can come into picture. The digital space will offer a lot more Indian creativity based on Indian principles than the physical, because the physical has been taken over by the manufacturing ensemble of engines, where for us to once again get that space will take a significant amount of time. But the digital space is with us. We can create significantly different digital experiences where our principles can be once again brought back.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great opportunity as well, because
Game design, lots of physical games of our past will need to be reimagined, actually. And what better metaverse, frankly speaking.
absolutely. And I think our India's strengths in the digital sphere also are very complementary to this. So it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, there is a certain algorithmic familiarity
Yeah.
increase.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shivakumar ji. But before I conclude this conversation, as I always do with scholars, I would ask you to share a bit of a reading list for our viewers. You mentioned a few books earlier in this conversation, regarding history. But for somebody, a young Indian who's just starting out to understand Bharatiya civilization and Sanskriti, where can they start, and what would be those books and authors that they can first look up, and then, of course, maybe progress to a next set of works?
Thanks, Kamal. This is important. See, I feel that even today, people should read all Amar Chitrakatha stories from first to the last. The old ones, not the new ones, the old ones. There's a reason for it. One, the aesthetic is Indian. The powerful Bhima is still a gentle guy. And the powerful Bhima bows his head in front of Draupadi and Kunti. Now, those imageries make a significant amount of difference. And it covers so many things very, very well. So people who have not read must read it. That's my view. Even today I read it. After reading it multiple times, I still enjoy reading the 42 comic Mahabharata in ACK. Of course, not. I'm not trying to be. Yeah, they should pay me. I always talk about. But now, okay, that's fine. So then, if you move further, there's one book I will very strongly recommend, and that is Michael Danino's The Lost River. And there is a reason for it. One, it has a historical narrative. What happened, when, so on and so forth. And you will see an enormous connecting of dots, and it'll tell people how, what is the complexity involved in a narrative making. So it starts from the ancient civilization, comes all the way what happens in the 20th century. It's about the river Saraswati and the fact that it was lost, or what it also demonstrates how to question an established wrong narrative. And it does it in such sophistication and with such calmness. It's confidence personified, and that is important. Three, it gives a lot of introduction to Mahabharata and Ramayana and everything else, and it creates a curiosity in that. So it does a great job in presenting to you a very civilizational narrative. It introduces you to a lot of texts. It collapses around narratives, and that's how all our stories need to be like this. It should start from the most ancient past, come till 20th century. So it gives you a long time frame, and it connects what the West did, who did good, everything it presents. You will experience enormity in that novel. So very few books will do that in terms of, and it is a readable book by even the young. I have made even 15 to 20 years students read that book, and they've read it. They may need a little guidance, but they've read it. It's enjoyable. It's beautifully written. So I think that people should read. A lot of Sanjeev Sanyal's books, people should read, because extremely well written, and you will get started. You will. In fact, one of his videos is so popular about sea route to India, that how Vasco da Gama was not the first person to. It's there in Amar Chitrakatha. People don't notice it actually, but that video made a difference. The books are also making difference. It's written for our times, and people should read that book. But the reason why I'm picking these books is that if somebody is a beginner, this is where this, and then if you do these 3-4 things, Danino's book is so good that scholars, youngsters, everybody can read it. And Sanjeev Sanyal's books are awesome to get started. Correct, factually correct, extremely well written stories, and so on and so forth. Then read a lot of myth fics, Indic Academy, authors, a lot of very interesting myth fics are there today, for people. Sai Swarupayers, Draupadi, so many people, everybody who has read that, has come back to me, said that, oh, this is how it is in the Mahabharata. Then they'll go back and read it. So in our Indica book club, it has a list of books. Abhinav Agarwal, our chief curator, is made a list of it, and that's one of our responsibilities, to ensure that we give the right peep and an introduction to people into the Indic civilization. But once people have passed through all this, and they've graduated, and to see things enormously, I will once again emphasize, you need to read Aurobindo, and you need to read Balagangadhara. I think what Balagangadhara has done is something India has yet to realize it, actually. Anybody wanting to undertake an intellectual journey has to read Heathen in His Blindness. It's the civilization correcting book. So I would say start from all those places, but end in Balagangadhara and Aurobindo. After that, one knows to undertake one's own journey. So in the meanwhile, you have to read a lot of novels, and I'll end up every. See, I will say that if people are anchored in their mother tongue, the journey is easy because all my initial reading is in mother tongue, and accesses are the resources are richer. English, our perspective is only evolving now. Where will I get Dr. K.S. Narayanacharya's Veda Samskriti Parichaya? Or before that, especially in Kannada, we are lucky enough. Whole 1890 to 1960, 70, our stalwarts have reimagined everything. Thankfully, we were not as much subjugated as the rest of India, due to which there is a flow of thought is somewhat continuous for us. There is a satatya that is richer in our region. All regions are not that lucky. But I would say that first, if you are anchored on in your mother tongue, it will happen naturally. Yeah, of course, if your journey has to start in English, then it has to be like this.
Thank you so much, Shivakumar ji, for sharing those very, very useful references and sources where we can refer to. And I think a lot of our viewers probably wouldn't know that you, for a long time, were writing in Kannada, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, true, true. And even now, I am Kannada's reflection on India today.
Absolutely. And also, if you could also tell us where we could find your writings for our viewers who would like to read more about, your work.
So on Indica Today, so Indica Today, Indica.today /author/Shivakumar GV. All my writing is there. So it's on Indica Today. You can go and search my name. So all that I've ever written is there on Indica Today in English and in Kannada. Some old Kannada stuff are there in my personal blog, and I'm in the process of moving all of that into Indica Today over a period of time.
Absolutely, and I think I would really encourage our viewers to grab a copy of the book Aryaa, an anthology of Vedic women. And yeah, if you could hold it up for the benefit of our viewers, this is the book. And like I said, what the next time you have to buy a gift to someone, this is that book that you want to gift. Thank you so much, Shivakumar ji, for first of all being with us today, but I think more importantly for your contributions, your scholarship, your seva for our civilization. And we at the Festival of Bharat really offer our pranams to your service.
The pleasure is mine, Kamal, and it's a fulfilling journey. It's a self-fulfilling journey. It's my own personal need, and this is something that we'll have to collectively achieve together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much once again, sir, for being on our platform. And viewers, please let us know what you think about the conversation today, about the various aspects that we've discussed, that Shivakumar ji has so patiently explained to us. And I'm sure there are many thought-provoking sort of questions also that arise, and I think which we are all would want to go back and read more and understand, the various topics that we discussed more, and certainly also read the book Aryaa as soon as we can. And please do let us know in the comment section what you think, and we will be back with another such fascinating conversation. Thank you so much, and namaskar.
Thank you so much, Kamal.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Chitti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. धन्यवाद, नमस्कार.